Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unity Center of West Lynn, Oregon. My name is Jim Lathrop, and I am the service assistant today. We bless and welcome each one of you today. In Unity, we believe each of us dwells in spirit, and each of us is here today by divine appointment. If you are new to Unity or Unity of West Lynn, we invite you to visit our information-filled website at www.worldhealing.org. Again, that's www.worldhealing.org. And now for today's mission statement. Well, it isn't just today, it is our mission statement, and we say it every Sunday. The Unity Center is a ministry where people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs celebrate the one common spiritual thread that lives in every heart. We are very pleased to have Jan Carothers with us today, and her message is titled Spiritual Light to the Storm. That ought to be interesting. And now, Jan will lead us in our opening prayer.
Thank you, Jim. There is only one life. There is only one power. There's only one presence, and that presence is God, and this is the day God has made, and I am so grateful to be part of it, to be here with you for each of us, to remember and to remember and to always know that there is no separation between us and that divine spirit that is us. And there is no time nor place, no part of our lives in which God is not present at the moment of our focused attention. And I speak my word this morning particularly for the challenges that we focus on, that we are experiencing, the opportunities to reach out beyond where we may be comfortable in order to see ourselves more whole, more complete, which is our divine nature. And I speak my word for healing and ease and joy and friendliness and willingness, and to do the things that maybe we don't always want to do. But to know that the community and that our life beyond this center, beyond our community, our life is God's life. Our hands and feet are the hands of the divine. And with that, I let these words go with great joy and honor and respect and appreciation for being able to be part of this message, for us to live in this divine tradition. And with that, all is well, and so it is. Amen.
Mind, life. Quiet moments in a fragrant garden, a stroll by a lake or stream, or a visit to any place of beauty inspires a deep awareness of peace. I also enjoy peace in the company of friends, those with whom I have easy camaraderie and deep bonds. Growing in spiritual awareness, I claim inner peace wherever I am. True inner peace comes from deep within me. If I am feeling less than peaceful, I pause and breathe out the worry, fear, and unhealthy concern. Giving my full attention to the divine presence within me, I breathe in a peace that soothes my emotions, calms my thoughts, and relaxes my body. As I continue to inhale peace and exhale concern, I move forward with renewed clarity and confidence. And now for some music.
Strong enough to bear the burdens that sometimes come living this thing called life? Am I wise enough to make the right decisions when I'm standing at the fork in the road? Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. Will I have enough to do the things I need to do to take care of myself? Will I have the health of mind and body to live a life of grace and wholeness? Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place. I am the place where God. You are the place. Moves and breathes and has we are the place where God shows up. I am the place. I am the place where God. You are the place. We are the place.
Wow, I love that song. I just do. Spiritual light in the storm. Dickens opens The Tale of Two Cities with the following lines. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. What a time, huh? There are challenges in our lives, and the storms of our lives come in many forms, don't they? And it's important in this month of August, always, but Unity has chosen awareness as the large theme for August. So it's important to be aware of the storms in our lives, but also how are we going to grapple with them? And at the same time, to recognize that all is perfect. So life is complex in this world of metaphysical perfection and the polarities on our plane. All of the various conflicting, challenging laws and systems and seasons. And aren't there times when you find that the conditions of your life sort of capture you? They are the swirling winds and the swirling emotions that come with them, and the sense of being or feeling powerless or out of control, being startled with spikes of adrenaline. Have you had these? Have you seen the storm clouds that can sometimes blacken our vision and darken our hearts? And we feel ungrounded, and we can flail about physically and emotionally with our thoughts, words, and deeds? Or is that just me? So let's face it, life storms and the conflicts that sometimes come between us in our relationships are no fun. We don't consciously seek them, we consciously look for the best. And sometimes we do what we can to avoid or avert those things, but in the schoolyard of life, there are surprises and flaps and upsets and accidents and even real tragedies. They do happen. And so how does a practicing metaphysician, a believer in the one, how do we deal with all of that? And so when the weather and the high waves and the winds and the turnabouts and the pressure and stress and so forth determine how we recover, then we need to pay attention to how we respond to all of those things that occur in our life, because we are in truth, in fact, at absolute depth and highest aspect of our being, we are beings of light. And as we say every Sunday, the light never goes out. We are beings of light who are experiencing all of the extraordinary opportunities and challenges that are afforded to us by being in a human incarnation. So as the world turns, remember that soap opera? It was my mother's favorite soap opera when I was a little girl. But in point of fact, as the world turns and the tilt of the earth and the law of gravity gives us many gifts, but also gives us many challenges. One of the gifts of our fabulous earth is that because it's tilted, we have seasons. We get the joy of the seasons. That is a gift. And there are cycles and forces of nature that come with those seasons. There are also other seasons that seem to be cycles in our lives. There's the flu season, and the tropical storm season, and the fire season, and every at least 2 years, and now this year, there's the political season. And while we are absolutely, no kidding, facing a very large crisis with climate change, we also know that many of these other cycles are beginning to converge, and they're calling out for our focused attention. They're calling out for us more than just in April for Earth Day. All of that is calling out in the world of physical forces, natural laws, and polarities. So here we are. On one hand, we try to recognize and remember the perfection of all things and the oneness of life. And we also get to grapple with all of the remarkable things that face us. And we do our best to avert those, cause the least damage, be safe for each other, and stay in the flow of strength and light of spirit. So we have these big storms, and then we have the little storms, and we have the self-generated storms, the things that are merely irritations, but sometimes, depending upon how we take them, we can build those up, we can enlarge them up into big deals. So right now, at this particular extraordinary year, we are facing some very present challenges to our ability to be creative and be collaborative and generative. We are trying to figure out how to safely send our children to school and make sure that their education, whether they go to school or whether they stay home or some kind of hybrid, how is this civic storm going to be resolved? And how do we keep everybody healthy and here to tell the tale? We're all looking forward to next year at this time, looking back. So there are spiritual tools that we can use to help us go through this process, go through this time. The best ways to cope and even thrive is for us to shift our focus from survival or hiding out and avoiding to seeking and then being the light. Because we need the light to illumine every dark corner that we could possibly fall into. We are afraid, naturally. We are worried. Some of us are angry. Some of us are upset. Some of us are confused and confounded. Storms do that to us. Storms are built to catch our adrenaline, to capture our fear. Storms are an opportunity to prove who we are, what we know, what we believe, and how we choose to be. There is this great phrase, how then shall we live? How then shall we live? And that's really the question for us right now. Not will we live, but how will we choose to live? There are some storm fronts that we have to resolve together. And we know that it takes some courage to not allow ourselves or others to avoid or resist or be swallowed by self-pity. And the problem with following these paths is that they lead to us wringing our hands, being ambivalent, being apathetic even, denying our depth of power. And that's where we must attend to, is not allow ourselves, our near and dear, or anyone to allow themselves to feel, to believe that they're powerless. Because we are nothing if not powerful. We don't have much control, but we have a huge amount of personal, spiritual, group, collaborative power. We have the will to be creative together. And gosh knows, all you need to do is look at recent events to know that there is some place for every one of us to use our creativity. There are so many challenging things. It's like a convergence right now. I don't know why. Maybe it's the magic of 2020. Maybe it's the theme of seeing life through spiritual lenses that is making us more focused. But this is the time, and it is not the time for dread or anger or defense or panic or paralysis or gripping fear. It is certainly the time, and we are certainly allowed the depth of sorrow and grief that comes from some of the things that have occurred. However, in its time, we also must seek the light in every way that presents itself. And ultimately, it will be our goal not just to seek the light and find it, but to embody the light. It's to be the light of our own divine nature. And when we find that light, we stay in it and we refresh it continuously by acknowledging it, first of all. Yes, I am a being of light, and that might feel kind of funny to say it. We can pray it in church, but we have to look in the mirror and say it. I am a being of light, and I am, like Myrtle Fillmore said, I am a child of God, and I am not ill. Illness is not part of my life. I have to begin to remember and remember and remember. And that even on this plane, if our story is one of illness, it will be filled with gifts. It will be filled with gifts because we are eternal, and the stories we're living are filled with challenges and adventure. How we live them is if we are going to be willing to own our own divine nature. We are part of God. There is no place in us that God is not. There was once a really wonderful illusion or an illustration that imagines all of the universe as this entire sphere. And that entire universe is God. And at every part on the outside of the sphere is the center of God. That is the pinpoint that God focuses through. And we are those pinpoints. We need to find the light, not just for our own peace of mind and serenity, which we definitely need, but also so we are strong enough to do good work, so we can embrace our challenges and personal mistakes and foibles and the forces that act on us. We do have, as part of our world, stress and pressure. Would you agree with me? So let's find some ways to strengthen ourselves for the variations, the pressures, the stresses of the small and the very large storms that we face. And we do that in several ways. We do it with nurturing prayer, reading, practices, perhaps yoga, walking, some singing of uplifting songs. My friend and yours, Reverend Jody Stevenson, who's out in Colorado now, but used to be here, always reminds her students that they have to stay prayed up. It's like keeping your tank full. You don't wait until the storm hits before you go to find waterproof gear. And you take part in a power or a prayer circle, a mastermind of some kind. I love that our center has a women's circle and a men's group. And these are not just social groups, these are spiritual social groups. And so you want to stay prayed up, not only for yourself, but because others, we kind of lose track, don't we? I mean, no matter how spiritual you are, you can be hit between the shoulders or you can be bopped on the head and suddenly you can lose track. You can lose track of who you are. So if I could see you all, if we could be together here, I would ask you a question. How many of you were scouts of some kind? Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts? Jim, you were. That's great. I love that. So what's the first rule of scouting? Right. It's be prepared, right? Absolutely. And then all those other things, about us that a scout is. But a scout is prepared. So you and I, knowing what we know, given the times, need to be prepared. And what will you do to be stabilized during a tempest? I love that word stabilized. I'm going to tell you about this wonderful book in just a moment, but in it he references the Queen Mary, one of the oldest of the grand steamships. And that ship went through its entire life. It never had an accident. It never got sunk. Nothing bad ever happened to it. And the people would say, well, wow, this is really wonderful. What is it about the design that made the Queen Mary such a successful ship for so many years? And somebody said it wasn't the design, it was the stabilizers. That this boat had some remarkable ability to stay afloat. And that's what we want to do. It's a cliche, of course, that into every life some rain will fall. But if we know that, wouldn't it make sense to pay attention, especially if you live in Oregon, to figure out how you're going to keep from being drenched. We don't mind a little rain, but we also know that there's times when the water rises, and we know we need to pay attention. So that's what we're talking about here today. Some tools, some practices to become a little bit better prepared when we see that there's clouds on the horizon and they're black and they're dark and we need to pay attention. Challenge for us is that many of us get so caught up by the Maya, by the swirling, by the incredible number of demands, by the kind of juiciness of feeling, I'm so crazy, life is so crazy, things are so difficult. Do you know what I'm talking about? We sometimes get a little charge out of having everything be really crazy up there. But every major spiritual tradition, and I'm talking about huge numbers of the spiritual traditions, are focused on training the mind's attention. How do you bring your mind to a state of calm? How do you train your attention? Because if you don't know how to do those things in the good times, you're a pushover when things get rough. You're a pushover. And if we do not know how to generate ongoing regular calm, we can't hear that still small voice. It's hard to know God in the midst of the material world. Most of us do work on that all the time. The swirling energies compete for our emotional attention, and our intention has to be on the prize. And it's the voice, that still small, divine, loving, heart-filled voice that we are listening to. And it's so quiet that we forget that it's there. So, you know, when you are attentive and you're aware, you begin to notice all the wonderful things that are happening around you all the time. So I want to ask you if you can remember back in February. Remember February, 7 months ago? At the Unity Center, we had our intentional giving program, and we, as part of it, made a pop-up book, a pop-up bookstore. And it was filled with wonderful new things, and it was also filled with wonderful, lovingly used books that you all came and donated so that others of us could buy them. And so I was looking through that book basket, and I found Strength in the Storm. You notice all the things hanging out of it. Strength in the Storm is written by Eknath Easwaran. Easwaran is how he's generally known. Eknath is his family name. Easwaran is his personal name. He's not really well known, but he is a major force in spiritual life. I think he would be more considered to be a teacher of teachers. And his story is very interesting. He came from India as a young college professor, an expert in English literature. Isn't that interesting? And what happened, he's in the mid-century of the 19s, and he was a great devotee of Gandhi as he was growing up. And he was raised and adored by his grandmother, his granny, he called her, who was an illiterate but spiritual genius. And he didn't really know who she was, who the depth of wisdom in her advice over all of his growing up, until much later in his life. But Easwaran decided that he would go to the United States and see what he could bring to the United States. But before he did that, two astonishingly difficult, storm-filled things happened in his life. First of all, In 1948, Gandhi was assassinated. He was devastated. It was the year that India finally achieved its independence, 1948, a very good year in many of our lives. And at the same time, just in a very short time afterwards, his granny died. And so Iswaran was destroyed. And even though he had built this really venerated career already, even as a young man, he was suddenly had that awakening experience in which he was plunged into the deep existential questions. Who am I? What am I here for? What is the purpose of this life? Which took him an entirely different life path, as some of our lives have also gone in very different directions when we began to discover and explore the areas that life presents us. So he came to the United States not as an English literature professor, but an expert in Emerson and in the Transcendentalists. And he was hired by a university to open their very first field of study of Transcendentalism. So he was a remarkable man, and he started a meditation retreat center here in the 1950s. So I realized that's quite a while ago. And he has just been under the radar, attracting students for all those years. He passed away just a few years ago, and he was, not about 20 years ago. But what he left us with is absolutely exceptional. What he did was translate the deep spiritual messages into techniques for living right here on this plane easily enough. And he focused on what was at that time literally unheard of, which is this strange practice then called meditation. So you see, in 50 years, quite a lot has reached out to change our lives. So he has some techniques, and I wanted to share some of those with you because they are in the style of your emergency pack or your getting prepared pack. When the times are difficult and the storms have different magnitudes, but still storms nonetheless. You need tools so you can't be knocked off your center, and I need them too. So it's so interesting. Our good friend Bea Quezada is the one who donated this book. And when she did, I was standing there and she said, "Oh, look, it's great." And in her, I would show you, in each chapter, she had left her study guide because she had used this as a textbook in some spiritual class that she had taken earlier. She left all of her study materials, including all of these wonderful affirmation cards. So Bea, thank you so much, and I'm so glad I was there and aware enough to pick up the book that you contributed. So Iswaran absolutely believes that you need to give your mind some support, some stabilizing for the challenging times. And sometimes it's just a little drama, but sometimes it can be really, really disconcerting and scary, can't it? I mean, big things have happened, and big things will continue to happen in our lives. He is a devotee that believes in what he calls mantrams. Now, we know them as mantra, but I love mantram because it's so much easier to say, and say it flows. When you find your mantram, you see how it goes? So mantram, and you use your mantram for when you're walking, for when you're standing in line, in your daily practice, of course. You spend the time to use and be used by your mantram. When his granny told him about this, he said, "Oh, that's just rote memorization and repetition." And she smiled and said, "The more you use it, the more you will trust it, and the more it will use you." So what is a mantra, and which are the ones that you might want to consider for yourself? He gives a great series of them, and there's a wonderful website for Israel. And later I'll find a way to get you some of this information. But I'm going to read you a few of them. You've heard them. They're the traditional short sayings from the great traditions. However, he doesn't recommend you write your own. He recommends you use one that radiates with you. You may not necessarily think of it as yours to begin with, but suddenly you may discover you will be moved to it. He suggests you choose a mantra established by long tradition. And he uses the one from Francis of Assisi, or Buddha has great power. He really suggests don't just make it up. Be simply willing to give it a try. For Christians, the name of Jesus, or the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on us. Ancient mantras. Catholics also use Hail Mary or Ave Maria, just those two words. Many of us have had some time in our lives as Catholics, and I always thought that the rosary had a different purpose than just saying prayers. And now as I'm reading this, I realize what a power there is in the continuous repetition of some spiritual truth. Jews may use Baruch Atah Adonai or Ribono Shel Olam. Those two things mean blessed art thou, O Lord, or O Lord of the universe. Muslims repeat the name of Allah, or Bismillah. I had been practicing this. Bismillah Rahim, in the name of God, merciful, compassionate. The oldest Buddhist mantra is, and you've heard it before, is Om Mani Padme Om, which refers to the jewel in the heart, a jewel in the lotus of the heart. The jewel of the lotus of the heart. We've heard that so much, and it is so calming. And in Hinduism, the oldest and most popular, and the one we most associate with Gandhi, is Rama Rama, the name for God meaning the source of joy within. So, what if you don't want to use a mantra from your own tradition? That's just great. A lot of us are a little allergic to the early teachings that we came from. Some people are, some people aren't. You choose. You can never go wrong with Rama, he says. When do you use them? When you're running, when you're jogging, when you're walking, when you're waiting in lines, when you're in traffic jams, when somebody cuts you off in a traffic situation. Whenever you feel anxious, angry, upset, or afraid. When you do the mechanical chores like washing the dishes, and when you're falling asleep. He does recommend you don't do them when you're driving, because there is the time to stay absolutely focused on something right there in front of you. But there is a power. So consider that. So I'll tell you a couple more in a few moments, but I want to give you a storm example that I think is important for us, because while some storms are personal, some storms that are personal affect us all. And each one's experience is unique. And sometimes people have different ways of expressing or living out their particular storm experience. Some people grieve for a very long time. Some people put that away for a while and go back to it later. We have no place in judging how people experience their experiences. However, what we don't want is for people to suffer unnecessarily, and we want them to know that they are loved. It is still not for us to give advice about how other people live their experiences of grief and sadness. But to talk with you about this, when I was a girl, in 1962, on October 12th, many of you will remember or heard about if you didn't live here. What started out as Typhoon Frida came ashore in the Pacific Northwest as the Columbus Day storm. And it was also known as the Big Blow. It was a windstorm that has been considered the benchmark of extratropical windstorms even up to now. Winds came to 179 miles per hour at different parts of the Pacific Northwest. The brunt of it came to Oregon and to some degree in British Columbia. So I lived on Mount Hood with my brother and sister and my mother and father. And the way life is on Mount Hood every winter is that the electricity goes out frequently. So we had some things always prepared, and we didn't think much about it. So that afternoon, my brother and I are playing chess. The lights are out, of course. There's candles, there's lanterns, there's a fire in the fireplace, and we have a battery-operated radio, but there's some static on it, so we're not listening to it too carefully. Now, my mom and dad had a romantic practice. Every Friday afternoon, he would close his office and take the afternoon off for a Friday afternoon date in town. They could do anything they wanted. And sometimes they went shopping, sometimes they went to the movies, sometimes they had, who knows what all they did. But that was their afternoon and nobody took it away from them. So they're downtown, they're at Lloyd Center. The city is a disaster. Trees are falling. Sheet glass windows are falling out of stores. It's terrifying. And yet they're 45 minutes, 40 miles from Portland, up on Mount Hood, and their kids are up there alone in the midst of a forest. And my mother is terrified. So they work their way. There's downed power lines. It takes them a very long time to get home. I can only imagine what was going on in my mother's mind. And when they got home, there we were, just as pleased as punch, just having a lovely time, not really aware of how bad this storm is. She is nearly hysterical. She looks at us, she's so concerned, she wants us to be okay, but at the same time, all that adrenaline, you know how it is when somebody doesn't get what a big deal something has been. So what's the big deal? We are not the most compassionate people. We're in our early teens. My brother's about 10, I'm 12. My little sister's younger than that. We just don't get it. I remember that as the most important aspect of the Columbus Day storm. My mother and dad arriving home, having come through this harrowing journey to get home on Highway 26. And me and us not really getting it. I mean, yes, we understood it was a storm, and we certainly learned more. But the difference between the person who's going through it and the person who isn't going through it is great. And so compassion is really important. It's one of the strengths we can offer. It's one of the gifts of light that we can offer people. I bought that book when Debbie gave it to me, and I did what I did with all those great books. I put it on my to be read pretty darn soon stack of books on my book nightstand. And I haven't looked at it since February. And here we are. We have that brilliant message from Christine Green last week. And by the way, if you didn't have a chance to hear it, it was called The Sacred Pause. And you should go back on YouTube and catch that up. So here's Eswan, and I'm now in love with him. And I'm going to read a whole bunch of his books. But as a teacher of teachers, here's what some other people said about him. Wayne Dyer: to me, Eswaran is a celestial light on our planet. A celestial light. So it's worth paying attention. And Deepak Chopra said, I have been a lifelong student of the work of Eknath Eswaran. His books offer timeless wisdom, that great reference for healing in our contemporary world. And if you read his books, you'll say, I know that. I know that. I know I should do that. I know I need to have a meditation practice. I know I need to do continuous, focused mantra work. One of the things he says when you are facing a particularly challenging situation is to do a mantra walk. And what he means by that is a fast walk and a fast saying of the mantra. So, and if you're still caught up, he says, walk a little faster and speak a little faster. By the time you are done, you will be so single focused that your adrenaline will be entirely focused on the walk. And the idea is to get yourself to be single focused. And for a while, haven't we in this culture made something of a deal about multitasking? Isn't it amazing how much we can multitask and be still focused and be still effective? Well, we know that the science is already in on multitasking and you're not as effective when doing it, but we still think it's got kind of a cachet. He says one thing: slow down. Remember, he was a student of Gandhi, and one of the things that Gandhi said is the meaning of life is not to increase its speed. Not to increase its speed. And it is amazing, he has story after story of people who used to be quite the zany performers and suddenly discovered that they would actually get more done by slowing down. Actually get done more by slowing it down. So we are giving ourselves some awareapathy, aware-apy, as in therapy. The other book on my stack, the other one I bought at the bookstore, turns out to be The Eye, that's capital I, The Eye of the Storm. I had 2 storm books on my bedstand. And this is by Reverend Gary Simmons, Unity's Minister of Peacemaking. There's so much good stuff in that what I decided I would make my own little 2-part series. And the next time I speak for you, we will look into Gary Simmons' book, because that's all about the conflict and the storms we have interpersonally. As it is just looking at life, our life experience can sometimes feel mean or cruel or unfair. And one of the things that Eswaran says is the way out of this grief is to find purpose. I don't know if any of you watched any of the Democratic convention last night, but Joe Biden spoke the same way. The meaning, the way out of this grief is to find purpose. But to find purpose in the midst of the storm, you have to be quiet. You have to be willing. Paramahansa Yogananda said, the human body is a divine idea in the mind of God, the Master said. He made us from rays of immortal light and encased us in a bulb of flesh. We have placed our attention on the frailties of the perishable bulb rather than the eternal life energy within it. And one more quote from Yogananda. You may be like the student who said, God seems vague and far away. And he said, the Lord seems distant only because your attention is directed outward to his creation and not inward to him. Whenever your mind wanders, patiently lead it back to remembrance of the indwelling Lord. In time, you will find him ever with you, and God who talks with you in your own language, a God whose face peeps at you from every flower and shrub and blade of grass. Don't you love that? I love it. I just think that is so beautiful. He made us from rays of immortal light. So our job, as we're coming to the end of this, is just a couple of more techniques here in order to remove the dark screens of egotism and defensiveness, because that, quite frankly, is some of our upset. Some of the upsets are almost self-generated, but in some cases, it's the baggage that we apply to our upsets. While we cannot control the absolute circumstances, we can always have something to say about our response. And you know, if you know any disabled people who are doing remarkable things, and there's so many stories, you know that they live that. They cannot control what happened to them. They have everything to say about how they deal with it. One of my favorite New Thought songs, and I hope sometime we can play it, but it's in every one of us. It's so much my favorite song that we put it in our wedding. And John Denver even sang it with the Muppets. It's in every one of us to be wise. Find your heart, open both your eyes. We can all know everything without ever knowing how. It's in every one of us, here and now. So let us be an ally of the light. Let's carry extra energy with us for helping other people with a jump start when they need it. Crises can drain our energy more quickly. And some of us have trouble saying, I am calm and compassionate when we're in the midst of the storm. So I was thinking that there's a nice little language tool one could use. One could say, I want to be calm and compassionate, and I am becoming calm and compassionate. And in fact, I really am calm and compassionate. You might have to give yourself a step-by-step process. And also draw on the light of others. Let other people know what you're experiencing without trying to suck the life out of them. Simply ask for prayer. Listen to the prayer. Use all you know. Call silent unity. Keep up your daily spiritual practice. And recognize that light is all around us. At the end of our service, what do we say? The light of God is in me. And I would like to close here with Marianne Williamson, who's pretty good to close with. We're all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us, and it's not just in some of us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give permission for others to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. There are two ways, and that's Marianne, and Edith Wharton, that great novelist, said there are two ways of spreading light. One is to be the candle. The other is the mirror that reflects us. Let us be the candle, and let us be the mirror that reflects us. I'll see you the next time. Let us all close our eyes and come together in that slowing down, quiet, inner place. The light comes from inside. We do not ask the darkness to leave, we turn on the light. And we know that there is a golden ball in the center of our being. We can see that, we can envision that ball. It's golden and it's glowing and it's turning like the earth. And as it revolves, that glowing, warm, shiny, gossamer light fills every corner of our being. And the ball continues to grow. And it grows. And it goes long, far beyond the boundaries of our incorporated being. And we notice that it continues to grow. And it reaches out past our walls. And it's past our town. And it's past the state and grows at enormous speed and calming rotation. And it goes on and incorporates the entire country, earth. It is the size of earth. And before you know it, it is the size of the universe. And there is no place where God is not. We nourish our minds, our hearts, all of our fellow beings, human and not human. The trees that give us light, the water that makes our life possible, the earth, and all the sentient beings who are no longer in bodies. All of them, the entire universe, is in God. And at your own rate and your own joy, you bring that golden ball back, 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 back where it nestles in the center of your heart, which is where it lives. And come back together. And we have some music.
Close my eyes, I open my heart, I'll take a deep breath, let the healing start. I lift my hands, I plant my feet, I let love in. I feel the beat that's calling us to rise, rise, spirit rise up, rise in me. And let in my soul, I clear my mind. I'm here and now, in present time. I feel the power of 1,000 suns lighting up the dark. Oh, we rise as one. Oh, rise, rise, spirit rise up, rise in me. Oh, rise, rise, spirit rise up, rise in me, rise in me. I sing to you, I sing to you, you sing to me, you sing to me. Change up this noise, make sweet harmony. Come on and rise, oh rise, spirit rise up, rise in me. Oh, oh rise, rise, spirit rise up, rise in me, rise in me. Heart to heart, hand in hand, no turning back, onward to promised land. Do you feel the power of 1,000 suns lighting up the dark? Oh, we rise as one. Love's calling, calling out your name. Love's calling, that's why we came. Love's calling, calling out the name. Love's calling, it's why we came. Come on and rise, rise, spirit rise up, rise in me. Oh, rise, come on and rise. Oh, spirit rise up, rise in me. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Come on and rise up. Come on, lift your hands up, jump, reach for the sky, going up high, higher, yeah. Rise up. Come on, raise your voice and shout. Love is alive, we're bringing the light brighter, brighter. Rise up. Come on, lift your hands up, jump, reach for the sky, going up high, higher, yeah. Rise up. Come on, raise your voice and shout. Love is alive, we're bringing the light brighter, brighter. Rise up. Come on and rise up.
Love that. Jim.
Message And we do appreciate your heartfelt study and preparation that went into it. And it was indeed very inspiring.
Thank you.
This is the part of our celebration where we act on our faith and commitment. We take this opportunity to express our gratitude for the Unity Center of West Lynn and for the abundance in our lives. And I believe that there is a slide up on your screen telling you how to donate. And we appreciate all of those of you who do, including and especially our intentional givers. Our intention and vision of the Unity Center in our 30th year, mark that down, 30th year, is Spirit-led. We are co-creating a vibrant, inclusive ministry, welcoming and supporting everyone on their spiritual journey. And now that the offering has been digitally given, we will say our offering blessing prayer. So together we bless our gifts and offering, and we say, God's love in me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. All right. If we don't have any announcements, those of you in the service who have an announcement are free to unmute and tell us your information for the rest of the congregation that's joining us today. And despite our mostly digital proceedings, there are monthly spiritual and service activities, and you are welcome to participate in any of those in the coming weeks. Please check our website, www.worldhealing.org, and our weekly e-news for details. And as we close our celebration and focus on this representation of the light of unity, we thank you, Jan, again, for your heartfelt and inspiring message. We suggest every one of us take the time to reflect on the assignments you have given us and the references that you have given us also to read. As you do, notice how her key ideas enrich and deepen your life. And we also hope you invite those you care about to share our Sunday celebrations with our great ministers and speakers, both live and on YouTube, under the title of West Lynn Unity Center. Next Sunday, we will be having Reverend Julie Applegate give us the third part of her three-part series that she's been giving us, and we know that her message will be equally inspiring and heartfelt reaction to her message that we can implement God's Spirit in our daily activities. So with that, we will end the recording before we sing our peace song. And we thank you again for attending. There's the light, and we know that the light never goes out because we are the light. And together, let us say the prayer of transformation. The light of God is in us. The love of God moves through us. The power of God transforms us. And the presence of God is who we are. Wherever we go, God is, and all is well. Thank you all.